Guys, it's me. I'm back again. Sandy, me, yeah. Yeah, your good friend. Yeah. Anyways, in the spirit of the earth, by Rethinking History and Time, by Calvin Luther Martin. So we are getting into this book, and they are telling us about thoughts from the earth, from the spirit of the earth, Not your educational thoughts. It's a little bit, like just native, like native Canadian kind of thoughts from the earth. So anyways, let's get into chapter 2. You can review chapter 1. Let's get into chapter 2. Creation of a margin. Here we go. Succumbing to fear. Wandering through a gravel wash in the high Sierras, Lauren Elsley recalls years later how he had chanced upon a polished flint from the hand that dropped it 10,000 years ago. Where is the hand now, and what language? Is a flint remembered? That finely controlled fabricator hand, inspired an enabling image and given voice in some long-forgotten animal-man blade speech, words and hand, now both lost on the air. What remained was the lithic mind print alone. In what language is the flint remembered? And in my own, Elsley's artifact is but a percussion-chipped and pressure-flaked Paleo-Indian blade of utilitarian interest. Its identity is practical, functional, strictly a device of human cunning and ingenuity in the ageless and necessary pursuit of sustenance. I'm going to lean back so I can get more comfortable with this book. Go Raptors! What is interesting here is how I warp words around the subject trying to locate it. I am tempted to call it an ancient artifact, but I resist. It is here now in my hand, bearing a true and always present message that our relationship to place and animalness is intimate, potent, and tricky. But I don't have the language to truly convey the richness of what my still Paleolithic mind senses. Mine are words forged in a smithy far different from that known to Elsley's ghostly Paleo-Indian mechanic and his metaphysical hunter-gatherer air. I speak a language long since purged of authentic animal and plant and elemental resonance and harmonics. I speak the language of the Neolithic, the triumphant tongue of man apart, the voice of history. I admit to being ignorant of indigenous and possessed words here. I do not dream or sing of such things as the individual who imagined this blade surely did. I am not part of it, just as this blade, when put under glass and labeled in a museum, natural history, somewhere will also become unhinged from its true constellation. A museum is not a place to know this thing, just as a zoo is not a place to know animalness. We're going to move on to the second part because it already ended, so let me see how long this is. We'll go 2 parts into chapter 1. Part 1 and part 2 of chapter 1. It was a place given over to winds, Wind seemed in control of what transpired here now. Before winds, it had been water. Tumultuous rivers of silt that over the eons had sandpapered this slit into the high plateau, sculpting it into fantastic shapes and eddies, moving always deeper into the earth as though to lay bare its powers. Here humans had journeyed and set down over the millennia during the age of water. The Anasazi, ancient ones, had built their eerie cliff dwellings farther up the canyon, downstream, as it were, from where I entered it. Upstream, although the bed was bone dry when I visited, the cannon stopped in a box. Dead end, the sandy pebbled reverb was strewn with empty bottles of Garden Deluxe, mostly the cheap California wine popular among these contemporaries. Novato, who can no longer be a part of it, a canon redolent with meaning, despair at one end, faith at the other, cosmic connection and disconnection, both ends demonstrating mankind's power of imagination, and that the world of Homo sapiens is always a potent place, a trickster realm, all situated in the river of time, except the river, and somehow time's quicksilver had vanished. A canon seemed engaged in transaction, which my culture had ill-equipped me to divine. Chiseled into a transverse ridge on the arroyo floor was a row of figures. Petroglyphs, a hope, a dream, a communication, rabbit tracks, hooves, and a horned serpent. Humanity beseeching the powers of a place for rain, for the river to come again for gain. The sacred game etched into the land at just the correct spot. I knew it for the place of power and illumination that it was. And so I walked softly, even while realizing that I was bereft of effective communication with it. Communication in words and artifice, if not in imagination. My deepest impression was that I was intriguing, lacking conversations in these matters. I sensed I was out of category. I felt that what language I did control and what artifice I habitually practiced were hostile to what was going on here, to its properties. I felt watched. I had noticed the careful piled stones and other signs of human meditation under a cliff overhang a short way off from the glyphs. Some contemporary of mine, Novato, no doubt was still fluent in these powers. That pleased me, both as counterpoint to the smashed bottles and repudiation of my culture's turn of mind, of phrase, of hand. Still, I knew I didn't belong. On the reservation, it was a place that had not yielded to the denaturing forces of my civilization's speech and artifice. I knew I was being observed. The words of the magician snaked in and out of my consciousness. It has become clear to me that perception has to be understood and recognized as a reciprocal exchange. When we see things, we are also being seen by them. When we hear things, we are also being heard. Perception is a type of communication and precedes language. I like that. I felt sacred. I felt I was communicating on the farther side of language, the place where language is born. There was nothing for me to say audibly, nothing for me to fashion as Novato Seeker recently before me had done. My hands were skilled only to the service of strangely alien errands. I stood in a place of palpable powers of earth, an intruder. I was deeply ashamed and, yes, frightened. This was a place of enormous meaning to me. I felt lost, yet in some infallible way I felt I should stay. So, staying, I knelt down on top of the smooth bedrock, slowly tracing its figures with my fingers and hands, feeling for their grace. Traditional magicians seem to be able to flood the world which surrounds them with their imagination, to let their imaginations out. If we have a creative imagination, then the world itself must be filled with imaginations. Not just human imaginations, but the imaginations of all other creatures around, and the plants and the trees. The day before, I had played the piano in the mission church in the village nearby, hymns to a Middle Eastern sky god who seemed to me almost ludicrously out of place in this landscape. The minister had heard that I could play and implored me to. Having performed well a believer for my dad's services many years in the past, I would do so now as an unbeliever to humor this man, the missionary who could laugh that he spoke no Novato. Fingers that could play hymns to an incredulous Neolithic deity now sought to know the songs of these pecked images. All I heard were the sighs and whispers of wind song here and there, fingering the cannon walls around me, ceaselessly sculpting minarets and flaunting into the pliant rock. I thought of words as sculptures of space, as turnkeys, liberators or jailers of the powers about us. The wind was certainly a better musician than I, releasing powers to which my culture was oblivious. Perhaps because I am something of a magician myself and a canoeist, I have always been attentive to winds. I had hiked this canyon 2 days before my wife Nina and another couple, and on the way back she had suddenly stooped down and plucked a still perfect arrow point from the sea of pebbles and smoothened stones that formed the canyon floor in the vicinity of the glimpse. The four of us spent the next hour scouring the area for more in vain. Alone now, I was in a far different frame of mind. I was in search of a theophany which, from the previous visit, I detected was still here and might, I halfway wish, teach me something, might speak or sing to me. I was the closest I've come to a vision quest in order to touch those. I believe it's necessary to let out our imagination, to breathe it out, to cough it up, if you will, to take all the work we've been doing in our interior psyche, all our spiritual work, and breathe it back into the space that surrounds us. Then we'll find that that is in fact where the psyche lives. That is the magician's secret. The spirits are right there if you would only recognize them. Here and there in a distant dust devil coalesced and danced in the fullness of time. After work this way for many years, I begun to get a sense of perception. It's a very attractive and engaging work by which we constantly move out ourselves through our eyes, ears, mouth into the world, and dance in that world and shape it. Perception, being seen, heard. By what I saw and heard, the idea suddenly snapped into a place that fit here. Here in this canyon, my sensations of being watched or my trespass of unease were the reciprocal exchange my magician friend had been talking about. I straightened up and stepped away from the petroglyphs, idly casting my eye over the pebble floor, wondering whether there might be another projectile point lying hereabout. As I did, I had the gathering realization that such thing would find me, but only if I imagined myself into its flesh first. I could let my imagination out into this object. I could become part of it, and there it lay at my feet, white and flawless, save for a small chip at the tip. I picked it up and welcomed it. We seemed to be two sentient beings joy. Just as I cradled it in the palm of my hand, I half noticed the faint wind of the dust devil gathering behind me. In an instant was a traffic report like the sound of a gunshot immediately at my back, and I whirled around. There before me stood Whirlwind Bean, in stature, as best I recollect, slightly taller than me, confronting me, the visitor. Who can know these things? I felt I was being interrogated. I felt guilty and vulnerable, holding back lithic in my hand. Was this the keeper of the artifice, the spirit of place? I had deliberately squeezed my imagination through an aperture and entered the spiritual dimension of this canon. I had willfully asked to be found by a sacred object, and had been. Was I to be surprised at finding myself face to face with the wind spirit? I wasn't, yet I was. I had been unprepared, that was it. What I said, yes, I spoke as best as I could, a word and gesture of respect, seemed to come forth of its own violation, and with the operation whirled away to the rim and vanished. I tried to stay, to dismiss it, and carry on with what I had been doing, but what I had been doing was done. It was over metaphysically. There was an immense, even crushing sense of closure. I knew I must go. I had the sensation of being ejected. Buttoning the arrow point into my shirt pocket, I quickly walked out. Had the cannon closed up behind me, I would not have been surprised. My mind raced as I drove back to the hospital compound where we were living. I knew from anthropology the visions were properly deeply troubling experiences, and they were beginning of knowledge, of new identity, of empowerment. I hoped this experience would be for me. There was also the queer sensation that I had had no choice in this matter. In the hours and days that followed, my rationality pecked away at my recollection of my experience. One can guess the gist of the debate, the insinuating logic, but I silenced it. The white projectile point, meanwhile, lay on my burrow, and I often felt it. It seemed to be feeling me too with its imagination, and I did not forget what the magician had said. I now sought advice. The missionary had lived for some years, and I knew from talking to him that he was conscious of the spiritual sensibilities of his tiny flock. It occurred to me that he might have heard talk of wind beings. It mattered little what the occasion might have been. I sought him out. He assured he was not surprised by the incident. There were demons inherent in this landscape. He sometimes sensed them in the very sanctuary, even as he preached. It was as though my father were speaking. The explanation, the term was too simplistic and were incongruous to this place. They smothered something of immense potency and meaning. They were the words of a man who could not bear to give himself sensual to the place. The preacher was ignorant to the matter. The head nurse at the clinic had lived at the reservations in this place for years. As artist and healer, a magician and poet, she told me, descended from gypsies, and I believed her. She was witchy, remote, and wildly sensual. A dawn runner, a woman who could dance stripped to the waist at night before a fire, throwing shadows on cannon walls. I described the encounter in the canon. She replied after a moment's reflection, out here one sees things with great clarity, clairvoyance, that was it. I had a word to give it, feel it, locate it. I went back and held the point, a thing not harnessing wind but born of it. Contemplated clarity. Once touched by an encounter, meaning can take shape, and it was. We were to leave soon. Nina, in the final year of medical school, was being reposted to the Indian Health Service Hospital at Shiprock. We were to leave soon. Nina, in the final year of medical school, was being reposted to the Indian Health Service Hospital at Shiprock. I am not a collector, in fact, quite the opposite. Even so, in this instance, I had the impression that one cannot hope to possess the things of the wind cannon. It belonged out there. It made sense only there, on the holy ground where I had stood. It was part of place. So shortly before leaving, I took it back to the wind place, spoke to it, thanked it for its lesson, caressed it, and returned it. One feels foolish revealing such rights, but I knew it was right. Intuition, maybe. So that's part 1 and 2. In the spirit of the earth. That part was about finding something from the earth, trying to understand it, and then in the end, putting it back where you found it. That's basically life. Amen! So that's In the Spirit of the Earth by Calvin Martin. Rethinking history and time. Thank you for listening. Give me a thumbs up, like, share, listen, comment. Love you guys.